Hey folks, this is Chris and I'm here with another product review. The lens that I take with me in a museum, and I do it every time we travel somewhere. In fact, most of the time we travel only places that have a museum, and I'll shoot 1,000 to 3,000 photos on a given trip in a museum. I'll do close-ups, I'll do them from a distance. And what's happened for me is I need to have enough room where I can back up and get the whole painting and get close enough and get details. So if the lens is too long, then I have to get too far away, and typically there's too many people in the way and I can't get that far away. And if it's too short, it distorts. So the happy medium is a 50mm lens, and this happens to be a 1.4, but 1.8 is fine. The f-stop that I tend to use is a 2 to 2.8. I really try for 2.8, because what happens is, so I take my whatever zoom lens I'm using for everyday photography, and I have a D850 and this is a D780. What I do is I pop the 50 on, that's all I take in the museum. That's it. And what happens is though, when you're like this and you're parallel to the painting, then everything's the same distance and it's in focus. But if I lean up at all and the camera's tilted up, what happens is one part of it is in focus, but 3 feet higher is out of focus. So you have to keep your lens and your camera flat as you do that. Now, one other topic, how much you spend on your camera. I don't know the actual numbers, so let's just generalize. There's two types of cameras. There's what's called a DX sensor, it's a little smaller, and an FX sensor that's bigger and it's larger. A cheat sheet might be, if you spent less than $2,000 on your camera body without a lens, you have a DX sensor. So a DX sensor means that a 50mm lens is not 50. A 50mm lens is 75 on a DX. It multiplies it by half, 1.5. So if you have a DX sensor, check with the manual, Google online, do whatever you have to do, then you might want to buy a 35mm lens, because that will equate to be 50mm. This 780 is a DX full frame lens, and therefore I used a 50mm lens. Now that brings up one last topic, and I hate to confuse this, but I think it's important. Cameras under like 24 megapixels and under, you really don't have to worry about your shutter speed in the museum. You can take pictures at a 30th of a second, at a 60th of a second, 125th of a second. But my D850, the Z9, the Z8s, the 46 megapixel cameras, and the Sonys at 61 megapixels, I have found that I can't have the shutter speed the same or it blurs. Because the magnification is so great with that many megapixels, it's noticed. So when I make my shutter speed 4 times the focal length, then I have crystal clear pictures. So I would have my shutter speed at 200, my aperture at f2.8, and then I just change the ISO to where it looks good in the studio or in the museum, which is typically around 1600, 1100, sometimes 2200. I try not to go over 2200, but sometimes you have to. So I didn't mean to make this complicated. 50mm lens is what you need. If you spent less than $2,000, you might be looking to see if you have a DX sensor. There's nothing wrong with a DX sensor. I can't tell the difference from a DX or an FX when I'm in Lightroom. They just do different things and they fit different niches for people. So a DX sensor needs a 35mm lens. You're gonna put it at f2.8, so you don't have to spend all this extra money for 1.2. So if you need help identifying the 50mm lens and the DX, then you can look for it in show notes. If you want to see how we take our photos and actually turn them into paintings, we had a series of paintings on our website called Paint with Chris, and that's at artsecretsstudio.com.